Dwarf, and how many pints did they need to come up with that?
Well, it was partly because there were two reasons. Partly because it was RD and it was Robin Dunn. That's when we thought, yeah, that's the one. But it started out where I wanted to have something stellar in the name, some part of the lifespan of various stars. This obviously was back in '83, and when you wanted to do research back then, you had to open what we call a book. You either had to go to a library to get the book and hope that the book was in, or you had to buy it. And on this one, we got some kind of encyclopedia of space. I don't think it was a junior encyclopedia. I think it was a proper. And we went through the various life cycles of the stars. And White Dwarf didn't work because there was a magazine, a gaming magazine called White Dwarf. And we latched onto Red Dwarf because it's not as big or as powerful as any of the other stars, but it goes on forever. And that seemed like a good omen to us. So
yeah, it was an excellent
omen. And bizarrely, we were down in Streatham at the time. I don't think we had a local pub in Streatham, and we lived there for quite a while. So I think it was a 0 pint discussion. And then we went out, I think, later for, I think there was a wine bar. I hesitate to say it.
Streatham, there's pubs all down the high street.
So the official answer to question one was, and no, 0 pints. Nobody got that.
Yeah, I'm not really buying that, but
It was. I remember it was surprisingly easy to come up with. We didn't have lots and lots of options.
How was the opening title sequence devised, and by whom? And how many pints did it take to come up with it?
Well, I can answer a bit of this, but I need a bit of help from Rob. My memory of this was that when we first got the script, we thought the first thing we need to do is the first thing that needs to be done, which is the model shots, because that's going to be the first thing to be shot before the rest of the show. We sat in a pub in Camberwell, and we were sitting there having our important production meeting. And I'm pretty certain about this, actually, that we came up with the idea of the great big long spaceship flying. And that was in our first session. And that was approximately, I can't tell you how many pints actually yet, but I've got an idea of how many that was. And then we had a second meeting in the nameless pub in Camberwell, and then had another thought about the opening titles and came up with the idea of Lister cleaning the outside of it. Yeah. And that was another X amount of pints. And then we were so pleased with ourselves that we had another X amount of pints to celebrate how great our ideas was. Luckily, somebody wrote it down because I don't really remember the rest of the evening. So that was where it was devised, and I've sort of given some of it away. And then in the end, our original idea was to have the spaceship going, and then you sort of develop around the front, and it would go in, and you'd see Craig. But it was so complex and different, we had to compromise. So we did have the ship running around, and then we did another shot of it coming across the screen, and then we went in.
It is such a wonderful opening sequence for its time, because first of all, there's the music, and you're in some lonely, dangerous, but interesting place. I mean, it really, Howard's music just sets it. But then you see this model, and it's a model shot, and but bloody hell, then you pull back, and now there's a brush going up and down, and now it's actually what we now know to be Craig Charles. And you pull out, and then you've got that wonderful sequence in the titles where the craft's coming. You're in the belly of the craft with it flying over your head. And so I think after 30 seconds, you've told so much story already in the opening titles.
I remember the direction we gave Pete Ragg for the model was we wanted it to be non-aerodynamic and ugly, because it was a practical mining vessel in space, and so it would make it different from any, it wouldn't.
Well, and the asteroid embedded in the side of it, presumably as a result of that, yeah.
But I do remember going to the model studio and seeing it, and it was 7 foot long, and they painted it red, and I thought, no, I didn't mean to be red. I didn't want a red spaceship, but it kind of grew on me.
Was Lister painting the ship because of the punishment detail in Stay
I think that's what we came down to, yeah. To explain his grumpy face, yeah.
My understanding was, my think was, it was 6 pints on the first meeting when we thought about the overhead shot.
Between three of us,
Yeah, so it's 2 pints each.
Right.
We were quite restrained in those days. And then the second session we had, which was where we came up with the painting idea, that was another 6 pints, so that's 12. And then we celebrated with another 3 pints, so that's 15. So the answer to how many pints have come to devise the opening titles was 15 pints.
well, 45 between all of us.
Oh, well, yes. Okay, you're going to be nitpicky on my maths. Okay, yes.
It just sounds better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does actually. 45.
Was Lister painting the ship because of the punishment detail in Stay
I think that's what we came down to, yeah. To explain his grumpy face, yeah.
My understanding was, my think was, it was 6 pints on the first meeting when we thought about the overhead shot.
Between three of us,
Yeah, so it's 2 pints each.
Right.
We were quite restrained in those days. And then the second session we had, which was where we came up with the painting idea, that was another 6 pints, so that's 12. And then we celebrated with another 3 pints, so that's 15. So the answer to how many pints have come to devise the opening titles was 15 pints.
well, 45 between all of us.
Oh, well, yes. Okay, you're going to be nitpicky on my maths. Okay, yes.
It just sounds better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does actually. 45.
Which programs did Rob Grant and Ed Bye and Paul Jackson work on together before Red Dwarf? And how many pints did they drink? What total? Like how many pints did you guys drink in total before
That
you
would be a
worked on
big
Red
number.
Dwarf?
That would be a big number.
A very, very big number.
It is a big number. That's the only hint we'll give you on that. So programs that we worked on before, I can't give them, writing them down.
The nice thing about the entertainment department at the time was you could kind of pick your team, and quite a lot of people did have, Stuart Morris famously had Lydia Seaton and Chris Breeze, and Terry Hughes had his team, and Michael Hurl had, of which at one time I was part, and so was Ed. And so the bigger producers who had a lot of output were able to assemble a team around them. And I had Marcus Mortimer, Ed, Jackie Tyler, a core team. And we did, in fact, I think we started together on the Two Ronnies, Ed, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ed first came on
Oh,
board.
what were you doing on the Two Ronnies there? The hat check boy? What
He
were
was
you
the floor assistant. And then
Actually, I was a florist to start with, yeah.
And then the AFM, weren't you?
Yeah, it was an AFM, and I was a second AFM, which basically meant being nice to Ronnie Corbett. And there was one time when Ronnie Barker used to schedule it so that Ronnie Corbett normally started at the beginning of the day, then there was a long gap, and then he was featured at the end of the day. And he was a charming, lovely man, but he had a very short fuse. And he had a Jaguar XJS, and they were quite new and swanky in those days. And he said, Ed, look, I've got this marvelous new car. It's a Jaguar XJS. I went, oh, it's lovely. He said, look, this got this fantastic facility where if I press this button here and this button here, the seat goes back electronically. Do you see like that? I went, oh, yes, that's very good. He said, so I can make it go all the way back so that you could drive it. I went, oh, okay, let's try that. So he drove it, put it all the way back. I got in the car and I drove around the car park very slowly, got back out again. He said, fantastic. Now all I have to do is press this button and it'll move back again. Nothing happened. And so when he sat in the car, except for me, he sat in the car and his feet were like 3 foot away from the pedals. And we had to call the AA, and I had to stay with him in the car park in Sandbanks waiting to come back.
We all did Three of a Kind. We did Young Ones. Rob didn't do that.
Yeah.
Pushing Up Daisies was a Channel 4 show that Posner and I did, and Ed was still at the Beeb at the time. He wasn't freelance. Yeah. Spitting Image, of course, is Rob and Doug's show, and John Lloyd's show. I was never involved in that except sending silly messages which nearly got us both taken off air. But
oh yes, the flash frames. I forgot about
flash frames, which both Spitting Image and Young Ones was threatened with being taken off air. And then we did Happy Families. Ed did with me, and then we did Miss Wax with Ed, and then and 10%ers. 10% Girls on Top. Yes, that's right. Ed and I did 10%. I did.
I just had one here. Bottom is that? Did you guys work on Bottom? Loved Bottom.
I first exec Bottom, and then Ed took over the whole thing, ran it all on his own basically, and Rob was not there.
It was an interesting moment when Alan Yentop came to my house, and by this time, because Paul was gone freelance, he wasn't being able to be involved in it. And Alan Yentop said, "So who's actually in charge of the show Bottom?" And I said, "I am." And he went, "Yeah, but no, really, who?" And he went, "You are." And he literally, I promise you, he went, "Shit." And then he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, you better keep me informed." And then he said, the classic, said, "Okay, well, look, just go and do this hideous show. And if it's a success, fine, we'll take all the credit. And if it all goes wrong, it's your fault."
Alan, who really, really, really didn't want to call it Bottom, which of course made Rick and Aid all the more determined. And they eventually did say, "Look, take your choice. Take it, have it or don't have it. We're not doing it unless it's called Bottom." They wanted to call it Bottom Smells, but they agreed to.
One of the episodes was called that.
They just called the first episode Bottoms.
Well, I think we were only counting pints that we consumed together, and there was only one time I think we all had a drink on Three of a Kind, and that was at the end of the season. You took us all to a Chinese in Queensway.
Yeah,
and that was where Tracy was there. That was where the word smegma came up for the first time.
Of course.
Tracy had chicken and sweet corn soup. She said, "Oh, look at that! It's like smeg," and I didn't know what that was. And what is that? And she described what it was, and that was the birth of Smeg.
What came first, the name or the script?
Well, actually, I am going to include a pint in this. It's how many pints did it take to write the script? So you can have a stab at that. I hadn't realised that it had come first until I sort of thought back over it. And of course, we knew roughly what the idea was. It would be the last guy in space, and he'd be surrounded by people who weren't people. Names are very important. I sort of did a quick troll through my history, and everything I've ever created, the name came first.
I think, I was just going to say, Young Ones is another example. I think names are incredibly important. You can actually ruin a good show with a bad name. I can't think of one at the moment because it's a bad show. You won't know about it. So, but Red Dwarf's a brilliant, brilliant name, and it immediately gives you big, big clues to what's coming.
I'm just really interested to know what your favorite episode of Red Dwarf is. I'm personally a big fan of like Polymorph. Love Backwards. I used to watch. I remember actually when I was sick as a kid, the Backwards episode was like my go-to thing to watch. So I don't know why. I don't even think I understood it at the age that I was watching it. But I loved it, and it was like so unique and amazing. I'd love to know what your.
I think mine is Future Epos, because that was the first sort of sci-fi story, and it's a pretty clever episode.
Yeah, it was. You're right, and also it was in my memory, it was the strongest episode of the for me of series one. I thought when we made it, I thought, yeah, this is a great show. This is a great show. I do remember that. Yeah, it's rare when you're directing and you have to spend. Paul had to help me out editing Backwards because it was so complex and complicated. He was desperately editing while I was directing, and bits were coming through. It was just
sending you 30-second sequences up to the studio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, going, fuck me, I thought I was a producer. Now look what I'm doing. Christ, cut that. It's really good. So we managed to stumble our way through that one, but that was a major challenge. I like Marooned because of its dramatic sort of content, and the story was great.
Cool.
What's your favourite, Paul?
Well, I hugely, hugely enjoy and admire Backwards. It's watching a group of people of whom I'm very, very fond still to this day. Writer, performers, Ed, the whole team behind him. It reminds me of Donna Di Stefano writing down literally every little position of every little prop, because they're all going to have to go back in that same position after they've been shattered backwards.
But number 10, question 10 is interesting. How many times did we make series 1? If you're being literal about it, obviously we only made series 1 once, but we did have a unusual time at the BBC when we were trying to make series 1, and it resulted in us having to do something quite unusual. I don't want to try and give it away. But basically, I've given you time now. How many times did we make series 1? We made series 1 twice because there was an electrician strike. And so we basically rehearsed every single show, and we're just about to go into the studio, and then it would be cancelled because the electrician strike. And we rehearsed the entire series. So we had the entire series under our belt, although we'd never shot any of it. Because with a sitcom, what you do is you rehearse in the week and nail the whole thing down so that you can basically perform it very, like a live performance, like a theatrical performance in front of an audience. And in order to do that, you have to rehearse it and know it inside out and have it completely planned as much as you can. And actually, the answer isn't quite twice, because towards the end of series 1, we reshot some episodes or some scenes from episode 1, the end, again. So in theory, we actually made series 1 2 point and a half of a sixth, whatever that is.
A 12th. Is that be 12th, right?
Oh, okay, so it'll be two and a 12th.
2 and a 12th.
We actually, that's how many times we made series 1. And then, of course, with series 1 was remastered. So I guess you could say we redid it again, but only in part. And that was an interesting experience, putting some color back into it, because the show, we used to shoot on tape. Of course, now everything's digital and you can shoot straight onto card. But it used to be on tape. And so when we were editing, every time you had to re-edit, you had to lay the whole show down onto a fresh tape. So if you wanted to have to go back and change something, then it meant going down a generation, as we call it. Mm-hmm. And we could really only do 4 generations of tape before the pictures just became too manky and wouldn't be transmittable. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to the remastering and we could digitally remaster the shows, we went back to the original tapes from the studios, not the edit tape. So you'd have the original studio tape, you'd edit onto another tape, you'd edit onto another tape, you edit onto another tape. By this time, generations quality was going down. Mm-hmm. And then we went back to the original tapes that were recorded in the studios. We digitally laid them down and remastered them. And the remastered, it's quite interesting if you can be bothered to buy the remastered versions of Red Dwarf and compare it to the originals. You'll see a massive difference. And we also reconstructed some model shots and used some early CG effects. So there you go.
Well,
so the answer could be 1, 2, 2 and a 12th, or 3 and a 12th. Well, no, not 3. 3 and a 12th and a half.
I think. Am I right in remembering that the BBC had series 1 down as a 7-episode schedule, but Paul was fine with delivering only 6, so that the end could be partially remounted?
Ooh, I don't know. No, I think we only ever planned to do 6. I don't think we were going to do 7, because in those days a comedy series was 6. That's that was the standard number. It's possible that we had a 7th in the pipeline. That does jog my memory, but I think we went, well, let's not be completely unconventional. Let's at least deliver the amount of shows that they would have expected to get. There used to be a system where at the BBC where if you did produce an extra show within the budget, then they would find a space to put it in, and that would help your overall budget later on down the line. But and I don't remember that. And certainly with Bottom, we did an episode all based on in Wimbledon Common. And unfortunately, a poor girl had been murdered in Wimbledon Common, so we couldn't put it out. It would be too tasteless to do that until much later. So that was an interesting one where we had a series of 5, and then later on it was transmitted.
I'd love to know what your favourite moments were, both from Red Dwarf and also Bottom, two shows I absolutely love. I'd love to know, like, when you look back and think about your time on those shows, what moments kind of really kind of stand out and kind of pop into your head first? It's like, oh man, that's I really kind of remember this occasion because this happened.
Oh, there's many, but there's sometimes you get something unexpected. So there's a great gag where Holly in Queeg, I think it is, where Holly is instructing Lister to repair a piece of machinery, and he says, that's put the blue one with the red one, and then Lister joins it together like that, and then sparks fly out everywhere, and he explodes. And I was talking to Peter Ragg about how we could get him to look like he's really been thrown in the air. And so Peter came up with an idea that he jumped on a trampette, which is just below the camera. So you imagine the trampette's down there somewhere at the bottom of the frame, but out of shot. And we set off some pyrotechnics at the same time. And so Craig, once this had happened, he then leapt into the air, jumped on the trampette, and flew almost over the camera. And it's one of those unexpected moments. And then, so that's quite a big effect. It looked quite spectacular for a TV show. And then you cut to Holly and you go, oh, was it the red one? And because you set up such a huge sort of effect, unexpected effect, it made the gag much funnier. And it got a whopping great laugh that I had to cut down. It was just too long. The laugh was huge. And that's sort of things like that, the unexpected moments that you kind of go, whoa, wow, that's a bonus. I wasn't expecting that. So it's sort of little moments like that. I mean, there's lots of them, but that's one that pops into my head with that. And with Bottom, the fight sequence at the end of the chess game.
Oh my God, with the Spider-Man thing.
Yeah, and the fight at the end of the chess sequence was just brilliant. I mean, it was again, it's one of those things where I think, well, this will be okay, but actually, when we shot it and cut the shots together and got the isolated feeds sorted out and got them in, it was a great fight sequence. And another great fight sequence in the first episode in the bathroom cabinet, where the bathroom cabinet's taken off, the wall smashed over Rick's head, and a pair of pliers is put in his nose, and he moves from side to side. He smashes through a door, hits his head on a banister, and collapses on the floor. I mean, that's a good sequence. And it was, shooting-wise, it worked really well.
But what was your favourite episode of Bottom? Over almost every Christmas, there's certain things I'll always watch, and I always watch without fail Holy, without Gold, Frankenstein, and Grr. I can't have a Christmas without watching that. What's your favourite? Bottom
well,
episode?
I think that the Christmas show was my favourite. Yeah, I mean, with Steve O'Donnell and Chris Ryan just playing Spud Gun and Hedgehog, they were fantastic. And that's, funny enough, that particular episode is the only time I saw Rick corpse. I think it's when Steve O'Donnell's character has to go to the lavatory, and so he goes in a cup, which Rick subsequently drinks from.
Yeah.
And he says something like, "Ooh, tastes a bit nutty," or something like that. And then he corpsed. And he wasn't able to, he was furious with himself because he was a very disciplined performer. And it was a fabulous moment. It was a great show. I love that show. Yeah, that one and the one, I'm just trying to remember which one. I think Bottom Smells, the first episode we recorded that involved pheromones and dogs. Very funny.
And Gas Man. Oh my God, Gas Man. I've never laughed. And this is God honest truth. I've never laughed so hard at a show an episode of a show in my life as I have to Gas Man. Gas Man was just the way that they just pelt him repeatedly, when Rick is going at him with a frying pan, and Eddie is there
Rick's punching him and Eddie's hitting him with a frying pan.
That's it. Yeah.
What happened is that we kind of rehearsed that, and that was supposed to be about 5 or 6 hits, and that was going to be it. But the sound guy, who was very talented, Jem Whippy, could play in the sound effects live to the audience. And so he would watch what they were doing and he'd hit the button at the right moment. You'd either get a punch or a clang from a frying pan.
Oh, so that was done live. They did the sound live. Oh, wow. Okay.
We refined all the sound effects live to keep the audience who were in the studio entertained. And it became a bit of a competition. And that was the ultimate moment when they just didn't stop hitting it. They just kept going on and on. I was watching it going, well, okay, directing it and looking at all the cameras. Said, okay, whatever, we'll just hold your positions and we'll just, take a shot there, there's a quick cutaway there, take the shot there. And we'll just keep shooting this until they stop. And it just went on and on and on. And it was unrehearsed, unscripted improvisation, violence, and it was a classic moment.
What was Rick and Aid like to work with from your perspective?
Brilliant. I mean, brilliant. Really, such great. Apart from anything else, they wrote it all, so they knew exactly what they were doing and how it worked and what their intentions were. But also the precision, particularly the violence. They were incredible. I mean, they just knew how to punch and whack and smack each other, and also how the cameras worked. I mean, I helped them a bit, but it's sort of saying, I'm taking a shot from here, and they would adjust and go, okay, then I'll hit him on the left-hand side of the face, and his face will swing round into camera, that kind of thing. And it was a joy to work with them. It really was. And Aid is still a friend of mine. I go and see him a lot, and I used to see Rick a lot, but sadly, of course, he died. But it was my sort of highlight for me, because I had that entire show completely under my control and working with those two geniuses.